All right, folks, welcome back. We're joined right now by my friend, the great Stephen Moore, chief economist for the Heritage Foundation, former editorial board member and senior economist, economic writer, rather, for the Wall Street Journal. And Stephen, welcome. It's always great to talk to you. And you wrote a great column at heritage.org, which really, you could speculate all you want, and you do speculate, and you say that maybe these groups are economically uninformed. But the people who came out and supported Barack Obama the most, his biggest group of supporters, are the ones who are suffering the most economically at this point, correct?
Yeah, it's an amazing phenomenon, isn't it? Where the groups, think about this, Steve. What were the four groups that were most likely to have voted for Barack Obama in 2012?
Well, I have it here. Blacks, Hispanics,
Hispanics,
single women, and young people.
Yeah, exactly. And, some of those groups, like Hispanics, were, 2-to-1 for Obama, and blacks were about 9-to-1 for Obama. But the point I made in this piece is I just looked at the official Census Bureau data on income. And what I found amazingly, Steve, was that those groups, those four groups you just mentioned, suffered the biggest income declines of any other group. So the ones who were most likely to have voted for Barack Obama suffered the most. And here's what's interesting. You know how Barack Obama and the Democrats are running around the country talking about a war against women. What about Barack Obama's war against women?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the women in these groups, correct?
Exactly. Single women are really getting killed by his economic policies. Minorities are. And this just goes to prove when you try to make redistribution the centerpiece of your economic policy, virtually nobody benefits.
Well, that's why you have to be in the next administration. Seriously, without a doubt. And you have to, you may have a conflict here going, but the Republicans at the very least need to take this article, this column that you just wrote at heritage.org, and run with it and give and pass it around and have an answer for this contrived war. And the Republicans don't care about you if you're black, Hispanic, poor, young. It's a fallacy.
What you just said is so important, Steve. And I was actually on Capitol Hill all day yesterday with my friend Larry Kudlow, and we had the same message. We met with 4 or 5 senators and several of the congressmen, and we said one simple thing: Republicans have no message. They have no message. They're saying, well, we're not Obama, we're not as bad as he is. But Republicans have to give voters a reason to go out and vote for them. And Democrats certainly haven't done that. And the point is that if the Republicans had an affirmative message about how they're going to help blacks, how they're going to help Hispanics, how they're going to help single women through, market-based healthcare reforms, through tax reduction, through easing the burden of regulation. Those are things that hit Americans in the pocketbook. But Steve, I'm not hearing that message right now from the Republican Party.
No, and they can make excuses for why you're not hearing it right now. But I'm just afraid. I could picture Hillary and our candidate, and Hillary putting forth the same garbage that you hear every day in the media and from the left and from Obama, and our candidate not being able to say exactly what you wrote in this piece.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I showed this to members of the House and Senate, they were amazed. They did not know this, Steve, and it opened, I think, their eyes that, look, Barack Obama runs around the country, says how much he cares about these people, but he's done nothing for them.
Absolutely.
He's done nothing for them. And by the way, Ronald Reagan, who ever said, oh, he hates minorities, hates women, Ronald Reagan did far more to help the economic advancement of women and blacks than Barack Obama has done. In fact, under Ronald Reagan, I don't know if you know this statistic, Steve, blacks and women had the fastest economic income growth.
Yeah, no, I am aware of that. You've written that before, and we've talked about that. Absolutely. All right, let's switch topics here for a second. Well, first of all, also, before we get to Scotland, the food stamps, the rise in food stamps, it never ends.
47 million people. Wow. 47 million people on food stamps, 5.5 years into a recovery. I mean, explain that to me. There's either there's probably two problems here. One, the recovery is so flimsy that we still have, nearly 50 million Americans that are on food stamps. Number two, we've made it so easy for people to collect food stamps. As you know, the administration is advertising them in Spanish and English and other languages, trying to encourage people to go on food stamps. You know why, Steve? Because it helps the local economy. The more people on food stamps, the better.
Yeah, I know. That's a Nancy Pelosi line, too. And by the way, if you call this president the food stamp president, they call you racist, but there's obviously very good reason to call him that.
You know, and unfortunately, Steve, there are a lot of whites that are on food stamps, too, these days.
No, absolutely. No, yeah, no, but they
exactly.
I know. Anyway, all right, so tell me, if the Scottish voters vote for independence, what is that going to mean, first of all, for us?
That's a tough one. You know, I go back and forth on this one. I don't know where you're on this, Steve. I mean, I like the independence streak. You know, I'm an American. We broke free of England 200 years ago. But, you know, on the other hand, what I'm hearing from the Scots who would run this government is a lot of left-wing politics. So I'm not so sure this is such a good thing for the Scottish people. What is your take on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're fed up with supposedly the conservative way of governing, they call it. They still don't like Margaret Thatcher and the flat tax that she instituted there for everybody. So, yeah, it seems like it's a revolt against conservatism in some sense, real or imagined, and that's my take on it. But I just wondered if we would feel it economically in any way that you could see.
Well, look, I mean, England is our #1 ally in the world, always has been, going back to, you know, the end of the, you know, 18th century. So I do believe that it probably would weaken Great Britain, and I don't think, on balance, that's a good thing for the United States. But I also believe in self-rule, you know, and if the Scottish people want to break away from the United Kingdom, I think they should have the right to do so, and having people vote. Although it's interesting, you know, what happens, Steve, if this is like a 51-49 vote?
Oh, yeah.
Can 51% of the people decide? You know, remember when we broke away from England, I think it was, you can check my history on this, it was nearly, I think every colony, you know, basically voted that they wanted to be outside of England control.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, a close vote would be a disaster. Plus, they have a nuclear facility, a nuclear reactor in Scotland, England does, and they would have to somehow move it or shut it down or remove it. It would be a disaster on a lot of levels. Hey, Stephen, I hope to see you when you're in town next week up here in the studio, and we'll speak to you soon. Always great to talk to you, my friend.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, Stephen Moore, ladies and gentlemen, Chief Economist, I should say, for the Heritage Foundation, and brilliant man. He's right on, and this article, this column, should be in the hands of every Republican and their strategists, and the RNC, who I know you're watching. All right, folks, we'll be back after the Give Me Five, but first, you know, Americans work more than any other industrialized nation in the world, and since we all spend so much time with our coworkers, it's always helpful to know what inter-office gossip and other things we say, or, you know, more may jokingly say to one another in an email or in the break room. Could it come back to haunt us later on, legally and otherwise? Well, who better to tell us about this? And he's here to tell us more about the workplace speech. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz with You and the Law.
Did you ever say anything to someone in private that you didn't want other people to hear? A nasty comment about your boss? Maybe a sexist joke? Of course you did. Admit it. The controversy over Donald Sterling's comments, the ones that were secretly recorded by his girlfriend, actually cost him his NBA franchise. Could you lose your job over something you say privately, even to a spouse or a close friend outside of the workplace? Legally speaking, it all depends. First, in such a case, a court would look at what your job is. If your job is owning a professional basketball team, you may very well lose the team or have to sell it, because the very revelation of your private statements, even though they may have been obtained illegally, could make you unsuitable to continue your ownership. Yes, even if you did nothing actually wrong. If, on the other hand, you were a state or federal civil service employee and made the same comments as Sterling, you would almost certainly be able to keep your job. You can be fired from such a position only if it was proven that you engaged in deliberate wrongdoing. But every job is different with different rules. If you have a contract, if you're a union member, if you have job tenure, you're likely to have greater protection. Most Americans employed by private firms are in a category known as at will, meaning employers can fire you for almost any reason. And so your right to free speech is applicable between an individual and the government, but that right doesn't always apply with a private employer. If you post something on your own Facebook, Twitter, or other social media that your employer doesn't like, and you find out you've been fired, as unfair as that sounds, it might very well be legal. Now, there are exceptions. Federal law prohibits the firing of employees based on discrimination or for retaliation. Also, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 offers some other protections, but not everyone is protected. For example, a priest, a minister, or a rabbi who privately expressed disbelief in God might be acting within his constitutional rights, but might not be suited to continue in his clerical role. You have a right to free speech, but be careful how that right might impact on your employment, and always act accordingly. I'm Alan Dershowitz for Newsmax TV.